Hi, this is John from MJG Education. Today we're going to look at general training writing. We're going to look at one formal letter. Let's first look at some of the differences you should know. Here, when you have Dear Sir, Madame, you're writing to someone you've never met before. So the sign-off will be yours faithfully. Faithfully because you've never met them. In the semi-formal letter, you've probably met the person once or twice, but you don't know them well enough. Okay, this could be like a situation in an office. That's the boss. You don't know anything about the boss really, but you say hi to him every day. Here, you would say yours sincerely because you have met the person before. Now, IELTS, they're pretty uptight about this. If it says Dear Sir, Madame, you have to say yours faithfully. Don't cross it and say yours sincerely. Okay. The informal letter, of course, you're going to use your friend's first name, and your sign-off will be your friend or love or whatever it is that you do between your closest friends. And for your information, there are 11 different types of letter you may be asked to write. So giving advice, apologizing, explaining, requesting, persuading, complaining. Introducing yourself isn't very common, but it could be part of one bullet point, like introduce yourself and then explain where you live or something. Thanking, suggesting, expressing a feeling, and inviting. You should try and practice each one of these types of letters because on the day of the test, you don't want to be stumped with something you haven't done before. Okay, again, there's always a time limit. They give you approximately 20 minutes to do this and then move on to your essay. So the more you practice, the more you'll be prepared. Another area you can be concerned about are what the differences between formal and informal language in your letters. Semi-formal and formal letters will always use more formal language, whereas the informal letters you can get away with a little bit more. So here's some just general rules to follow. Don't use contractions in formal and semi-formal letters. So in an informal letter, you would say can't, but in a formal or semi-formal, you would say cannot. In an informal letter, you might say won't with an apostrophe and a T, but in a formal or a semi-formal letter, you would use will not. Phrasal verbs is similar. Phrasal verbs, of course, are two-word verbs, generally two words. For an informal letter, if you said blown out, well, in a formal or semi-formal, you would have to come back and say conflated. Likewise, got over might be referred to as recovered, mixed up, as confused. Or again, with colloquialisms and slang, informal, if you used a word like the mob, you would have to change that using a semi-formal or a formal letter to crowd. And an informal letter where you use still count on, in a formal or semi-formal, you might use expect. So just be wary, whether you're writing a formal or semi-formal letter, you're going to use more formal language, and the informal letter, you can let it slide a little bit. Here is an example of a formal letter prompt that you might get. It's a complaint, right? You're complaining here. You recently bought a piece of equipment for your kitchen, but it did not work. You phoned the shop, but no action was taken. Write a letter to the shop manager in your letter. Now, these are the 3 bullet points here that you have to talk about, and usually, generally, most all of the time, each bullet point refers to a single paragraph in your letter. But first, we usually talk about the 7 different parts of a letter when you write one. So we call this the greeting. Here you say, Dear Sir, Madame, because you don't know who you're writing to, right? Second, which corresponds usually to the first bullet point, we talk about the purpose. The middle bullet point here, explain what happened when you phoned the shop, refers, we call it detail, because it's usually this middle one is where you have to explain what happened. You have to go into the detail of the actions. And then finally, 4 here is the outcome, and this is what you prefer would happen. In this case, it says, say what you would like the manager to do, and that's why we call it the outcome. After that, you'll have a closing sentence where you say something like, thank you for your consideration with this matter. Okay. The sign off where you say yours faithfully, and then you'd write your full name. Don't just write your first name. This is a formal letter, so you need both your first name and your surname. Now, the greeting is out of the way. Great. Now, the purpose, usually you start immediately with the purpose. Like that first sentence, you come out and say what's going on. So in this one, the underlined part here says, I'm writing to you with regards to. Okay. That's a pretty standard way of starting a letter to let a person know this is what this letter is about. You're trying not to waste their time. Person opens a letter, they want to know what the purpose of, especially if it's in a business situation like this. You come right out and tell them. The second bullet point that says explain what happened. Okay. This is considered detail. And here they ask you explain what happened when you phoned the shop. So they get into it here a little bit. I'm going to read it on the next slide, so I'm not going to get into it here. Now, the outcome is what you would like to happen. And in this case, it says, say what the manager Say what you would like the manager to do. This is the biggest problem with people when they write letters, is when they get to the outcome, they start pointing their finger. They start saying, I want you. You have to do this. You know, a lot of these formal letters, you might be writing to a manager of a shop or a bank manager or someone above you, right? This is the big problem. But when you step in a formal letter and you start saying, I want you to do this, I want you to do this, you've blown the tone. And when we look at the descriptors, later on, there'll probably be another video for descriptors general training. When you look at those descriptors under task response, it's going to say tone may have been uneven at 6. And then when you get to 7, it'll say tone was consistent. And that's what you want to have, is a consistent tone. When you start pointing your finger and saying, I want you to do this for me, you've blown the tone, they're going to give you 6. Okay, so one way to off that, and especially when you're writing to someone who is in a higher position, or in a case like this where you're writing to the shop manager sort of thing, maybe the best way to get around that is to use a question form right off the bat, right? In this case, they say, would it be possible for me to bring this mixer to your shop for repair, as the information packet inside the box clearly states that there is a 1-year warranty for this product? Question mark. Now, the question mark does 2 things for you. It allows you to write to a person who might have some authority in these matters, and it leaves them the decision. You're not telling them what to do, you're allowing them to make the decision. So that's very important. 2, it keeps your tone consistent, and that's what you're after. When you look at the descriptors and look at 7, it says tone is consistent, but when you go above 7 to 8 and 9, they never mention tone again. So it just has to be consistent, and then your examiner might give you even a higher score than 7. We move on, and you have to have a closing line, like thank you for your consideration with this matter. Usually in a formal letter, this is the 5th point that you have to have in a letter. You have to say something there. Then you move on and say yours faithfully, because this is a formal letter. And then when you sign off, you can't just use your first name. You have to have your first name and your surname, okay, to complete that letter. Let's look at the next slide and we'll read through this letter. Here is the full letter that we've written that begins with Dear Sir or Madame. Now, just a note on, we call it face validity. When you're writing a letter, it's usually this way. The introduction or the purpose is about 2 sentences. The biggest chunk will be in the middle. When you give the detail, or that second paragraph, that's usually 4 or 5 sentences. And the last paragraph, the outcome, is usually down to 2 sentences. We didn't follow any of those rules here, but it's close enough. It's only 153 words. We're trying to get, your letter should always be between about 150 and 170 words. You don't want to go too long, again, because you're going to write that essay afterwards. So if you can do this in the shortest time possible, that would be great. So here in the paragraph 1, when it should only be 2 sentences, in this case, because it says describe the problem with the equipment, we have to go into a few more sentences. I think there's about 4 here. In the middle paragraph, it says, let me explain in detail. And they only asked, what happened when you phoned the shop. So they quickly explained here, because the machine was not working, I called your shop to see if I could arrest this problem quickly, but the person I spoke with on the phone said that there was nothing they could do because they believed that this machine did not have a warranty. So 2 sentences there, but pretty long, compound, complex sentence in that second paragraph. Part 3, we go with that question form. Would it be possible for me to bring this mixer to your shop for repair, as the information packet inside the box clearly states that there is a 1-year warranty for this product? And then they say I can be reached at home. There's the telephone number, or by email at that email. As can be seen, the 3 bullet points are answered quite sufficiently. And on the next page now, we're going to take a look at some of the grammar. The grammar used in this formal letter includes the red sentences, which are compound, complex sentences, and purple sentences here that are complex sentences. And that's all. Generally, remember with the essay, you always have to have at least 2 compound sentences and 5 complex sentences. Generally, that's a requirement. In the letter, you could probably narrow that down to 1 compound sentence and 2 or 3 complex sentences, and that would be fine. Generally, this answers to the criteria of sentence structure for a letter. Finally, just look at the vocabulary. Remember, with vocabulary, there's 2 ways to improve your score. With the essay part, it would be more about academic words, and related words. But, in the letter, it's more about using related words to the issue you're dealing with here. So they talk about 3 speed settings on a machine. They arrest this problem, kind of like a callocation. And of course, the word warranty used, because these are typical words that you would use. And of course, repair, because it is broken. So these are the ways that you can make sure that you score higher in vocabulary if you use words related to the topic you're dealing with in every case. You can follow MJG Education on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or Tumblr. We'll be updating that constantly, as with our homepage. We specialize in tutorials for the time being, as our website is being developed. So tutorials in reading, writing, listening, and speaking. We also do lots of mock tests that include feedback, oral feedback, if we do them through Zoom. And of course, you'll get feedback in a written form as well. We like to emphasize, too, that we're a Canadian company. You can save 35% if you're dealing with companies that charge you in US dollars. By all means, come back and check us out. We'll save you a fortune. Anyways, thank you very much, and have a nice day wherever you are.